My name is Josh Miller. I own Riverstone Kennels, and I've been training gun dogs for more than 16 years. I have field trialed, I've hunt tested, but at the end of the day, I'm a duck hunter. You might find that the duck in our DUK Dogs podcast is spelled uniquely. The UK stands for my British Labs. I love my British Labs. I love what they offer me, both as a part of my family and the high motor in the field. As you're going to find, I have some pretty special dogs. Follow along in our podcast series here as we talk about both in the field hunting and in the field training situations that will hopefully help you progress with your dog at home. Thank you, Eukanuba. Eukanuba Premium Performance Sport 3020 is what I'm feeding my dogs, and would highly recommend if you're looking for a feed to be feeding your four-legged companion and hunting partner, I would look into Eukanuba. Eukanuba Premium Performance Sport 3020. Thank you to Sitka Gear. Sitka, I've said it before, how it's changed the way that I hunt and that I train. But I really enjoy. I've never been a brand guy when it comes to clothing. I'm a big brand guy in a lot of areas. But I am definitely a brand guy when it comes to Sitka. I've fallen in love with this clothing. So if you guys are interested, look into www.sitkagear.com. And thank you to Gun Dog Supply. Gun Dog Supply, one-stop shop for all of your dog hunting and training needs. And they're fantastic, fantastic people. So www.gundogsupply.com. I am actually kind of excited today. This is Monday that I am recording this, and I had a big weekend, a fun weekend, because as a lot of you know that have followed along, I'm a big sports guy, and I just love the NFL. I don't know why. I love college football too, but I love the NFL, and this was a big weekend for me because I'm a Jacksonville Jaguars fan, huge Jacksonville Jaguars fan, and to the point that when I say we, Whitney and I, we have DirecTV just so we can get NFL Sunday Ticket, just so I can watch the Jaguars play on a weekly basis. And yeah, this is usually the point where somebody listening to this goes, what in the world? Why would you be a Jacksonville Jaguars fan? You live in Wisconsin. Did you grow up in Florida, something like that? And I always tell everybody, I wish I had a cool story to go with this, but I don't. And here's the story, is that the Jacksonville Jaguars came into the league in 1995. I would have been 6 years old. And I thought J for Josh and J for Jacksonville Jaguars was the coolest thing ever. And I have been a fan ever since. I remember being a kid laying on the floor of my parents' living room and watching us lose in the playoffs by a field goal. I think it was to Tennessee, and just scream crying into a pillow. I mean, I've been a diehard fan for a long time. And this weekend, for those of you that don't follow the NFL, with the NFL draft, the Jaguars had the number one overall pick. And the reason I'm so excited is because I think if there was a year to have the number one overall pick, which means you were the worst team in the league the year before, this was the year to have it. And it was mainly because one guy who was, I should say, the highest rated prospect in a long time, Trevor Lawrence, quarterback out of Clemson. And we've just never had a true franchise quarterback, and I live in Wisconsin, so I have to listen all the time. I have to, first off, Packer fans are so dang lucky. I mean, how do you go from back-to-back Hall of Fame quarterbacks? You go from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers. I mean, that's like hitting the lottery, 2 rolls in a row. But here's what I think is so neat about this. is, I'm again just ecstatic about this. I had my chicken wings and pizza just to watch Trevor get picked, and I'm like, this is a big deal to me. As I'm watching this, I really kind of started seeing a trend, and I started kind of having this thought process of how the NFL draft is so much like dog ownership, and as you go down that road and the work that goes into that. And I want to play for you guys something. This is a little audio clip from a podcast that I listen to, which is the Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. And they were talking about Trevor Lawrence. They were talking about how this will hopefully change the trajectory of the franchise and the impact that it means for this organization. And I want you to listen to this because this is really interesting. It was after this that I started watching the next 2 days of the draft in a kind of a different light and more of a dog ownership sense. So check this out.
John, quickly, we discussed the history of this organization and then the future. And it seemed like yesterday, today is that borderline between the two, that most everything that happened in the past you can kind of wash away now because it's all looking forward with these, especially the quarterback, but these two.
Well, that's supposed to be the story. And, there's no guarantees in the NFL or in life, but that's how it's supposed to play out. And what I keep saying, people ask me about this, there's no guarantees with Trevor Lawrence, but everything about him, meaning the physical, the approach, the mental, the NFL draft is a percentage game, and you're hoping to minimize the risk involved in a player. He's as risk-free as you can possibly get. So the percentage chance of what you just said, JP, is as high as it could possibly be. And right now, that's what you ask for.
I think that was almost eerie to listen to because it is a lot of what I've preached on this podcast and in seminars and so on. When I talk about puppies, right? When I talk about, dogs and what you're doing. And it was that comment that made me really step back and say, well, let's see how similar this is. And so over the next couple of days, I started watching, and there are a few things you guys might, find somewhat, comical about this because when I say comical, I mean like how funny similar it is. So as I'm listening to the draft, they're talking so much when a player gets selected that these teams are obviously looking for the best player they can possibly get, but one that has to fit their system. And I was like, well, yeah, that's upland hunters to waterfowl hunters to DUK Dogs to what are you looking for, right? You want the best player for the game that you're going to go play. Right? What about player traits? Like, we had, I listened to specifically on the defensive side of the ball, there was a lot of you want a guy with some swagger, you want a guy, that has, that attitude, that chip on his shoulder. But then, a lot of the quarterbacks, they would talk about, you want that composure, you want that, that clear vision, you want that, the intelligence side of things. Traits, again, no different than what we've talked about in the past. There are specific traits in these dogs that we're looking for, right? Like we're looking for, like for me as a retriever guy, I want the natural retrieve. I want the natural mouth. I want the composure. I want the drive. Really interesting. And then from a team standpoint, these GMs, these general managers are really looking into and doing their homework on all these kids because, we don't want any skeletons in the closet. We don't want things to come back and haunt us. And we want to make sure that, the investment that we're putting in, that we are going to get back out. I just thought all of this was so interesting as it related to, the dog side of things. And here, probably the big one for me was the reality is, and if you go on social media, I don't care what team you're a fan of, but you go on social media and there's going to be all these opinions of we had a great draft. We had a terrible draft. Why would we pick this person? Why would we do that? This was a great pick. Well, one, I kind of laugh because, as I've talked about on this before, social media sometimes makes me roll my eyes because like everybody that has ever owned a dog is an expert, right? Well, it sure seems like anybody that's ever watched a football game is obviously an expert now too. And the reality of it is that you won't know for 3 to 4 years whether these picks were great. No different than Trevor Lawrence. You won't know for 3 to 4, maybe more, if this was the pick that you thought it was going to be. Did he pan out to be the player that you thought he was going to be? Dogs, very similar. It takes years until you truly know what you have. I think it is so interesting how these two, kind of worlds, when I talk about, the athletics, specifically in this case, the NFL draft, and us as dog owners, as puppy buyers, it's really interesting, how similar, those two worlds are. And it made it fun for me because I've always had like this secret, call it dream, if you will, to be a sportscaster. And this is probably as close to that as I'm ever going to get, and I'm okay with that. But maybe at some point I'll have to do like a whole Jaguars episode. But the problem is only like 2 of you guys would listen to it. So it was kind of fun for me to look at that and be like, oh, I could talk about this a little bit. But I also wanted to talk about an experience that I had last week. And it was probably the most rewarding thing, maybe outside of Trevor Lawrence getting drafted, but it was probably the most rewarding thing that I had all week. And I think sometimes there's a misconception out there that because I train for a living, because this is my profession, that I don't want people to be training their own dogs, that I want to do the training. Which is obviously not the case. Otherwise, I wouldn't get on here and I wouldn't try to help people. I wouldn't go do seminars and give away free information. I wouldn't spend way too many hours on the phone literally giving away the information that people pay me for if I didn't truly try to help people. And this in particular situation was really special to me because it came from a client that has started as a client and has turned into a very close friend, and his name is Pat Minch, and Pat lives down in southern Wisconsin, so we don't get to see each other very often, but I trained Pat's first dog, Cooper, and now he has a Brock puppy named Louie. And I think Pat's just kind of in a different time in his life. When he had Cooper, he had two boys, both very good athletes, both went on to play basketball in college. And I mean, I remember Pat running around like crazy because being the dad and father that he is, he never wanted to miss one of those boys' games. And so he was always on the go, always running around. So it made sense at the time for me to do the work with Cooper, which I loved. I loved Coop. Louie, again, his current dog, his current pup, he is taking these steps and doing a lot of the training, specifically the advanced training, on his own, but he really hasn't gone down this, before. So, we've spent, text messages back and forth. We've spent a lot of time on the phone as I kind of walk through, certain drills with him and everything else. And, he'd been doing a great job, with the progress. He'd been doing a great job with, the training and step by step. And I think he was doing it so right. And that I got a text message. This was after a conversation that we had as far as like, he's done all the drills, he's doing really well. And he was anxious to get to where he just ran a true blind retrieve and set that up. And he wanted to see how it went. And it was so funny because I won't read you guys the whole text, but it starts off with, he did it with exclamation points. So we did some of our normal work. I decided to try doing a blind. So I planted a dummy, blah, blah. It kind of went through the whole situation here. And he said, I know still a lot of work to do, but a great confidence builder for the both of us. Thanks so much for your guidance. I can't be more excited. And what was so fun and fulfilling about this for me was that I could feel the enthusiasm and the pride coming from him through that message. And so, yeah, later on I called him like, all right, well, tell me about it. And he was, again, crazy excited. But he said something that that made me smile, which was, he's been doing this for a long time, building this process. He told me the whole thing, and he's like, man, like, my biggest question is, how do you do this in 3 to 4 months, which is what we do our advanced program in? That made me smile. And the reason it made me smile is not because, I want it to be like, well, look what I can do, or look what we do on a normal basis. The reason that it makes me smile is because Pat got it, right? Like he understood that. I think for me in my position, there's a lot of stress that comes from timelines. We've talked about this in the past, and specifically in that advanced time frame, because you can't just force the dog through everything. There's definitely that building block and that learning curve. And what I think is so cool is that Pat, having gone through that process himself, is probably much more appreciative of the journey than if he just would have sent Louie into me. I would have done it for him. I would have had him come in, train him how to handle him, and go home. Right? Like, he watched firsthand the bumps in the road. He saw the struggles, but he also overcame them himself, along with Louie. He went through it himself, and I think that's one of the reasons that, as I look at the whole piece of this here, that he is so proud of where they're at and where they've where they've gone, where they've come from. I think that's one of the coolest things about the dog, training piece of this. I take it for granted. I know I do. But when you can stop and look back and be like, man, like, I got that dog to do that. I helped build him from where he was to where he is. That's a super cool thing. Super cool thing. And as I look at the building process, I'm going to jump back to my NFL draft, piece of it. This is where having the right coach is incredibly impactful. There have been a lot of great players that have come into the NFL that did not have the right coaches, that did not have the right support system, and I don't believe they did not turn out to be what they should have been because of it. And I think you can make the argument the other way around. There have been some players that have turned out to be better than you ever thought they would be. But you look at the support system that they've had. Look at the coaches that they had to bring them there. I think when I went from high school to college, the biggest difference I saw was the coaching. Not only the knowledge, but the communication. How they knew how to get the most out of you. From a weight training standpoint, like, they would cater, instead of just, here's what we're doing today. We're doing, bench. We're doing, and here's your routine. No, you went in and it was, Josh, for you, this is what you're doing today, because we're trying to build X, Y, Z. And again, just coaching and how it relates to the dog side of it. Like, that's you as the trainer. First, you're the GM. You are going through and you're looking at, okay, how do I get the best player possible to fit my system? Right? How do we get the best dog possible to do what I want? And as you heard me play, and I think we can all agree, there are no guarantees in these puppies. There are no guarantees in life. There's no guarantee of how this is going to go on. But if we do our homework, we can eliminate as much risk as possible. From that point forward, you hang up your GM hat, you put on your coaching hat. Now you're the coach. Now it is your job to develop this player to get the most out of them. You need to learn how to communicate with them. You need to learn what works, what doesn't work. You need to understand what are this dog or quote unquote players' natural strengths versus natural weaknesses, and how do you lean on those strengths, build those weaknesses, and how do you round out the best player or dog that you possibly can. It's a pretty cool journey when you really look back on it. For those of us that have had old dogs, I'm kind of in a weird part, I feel like, in my career, because I'm getting a lot of those phone calls recently, like Copper. Copper was a dog that I trained probably 11, 12 years ago. He just passed away. I mean, there's been a lot of them recently that in the last 10 to 12 years that I trained and had a big impact on them. I'm sure, had a big impact on me. I still remember them. And, it's, not a fun phone call to have, but you look back on that journey, right? And look back on, that day one. Day one, they weren't what they were year one, or year 5, or year 8, or year 10 for that matter. And it's a cool thing to be a part of. And you, as the coach, is your job to bring them along. And it's your job to get the most out of them. I think it's a really, really neat way and kind of a cool analogy, to look at this, right? Is, development. You can start with the right prospect. I talked about Trevor Lawrence. Well, we have a brand new coaching staff. And I hope that we do the best we can. I hope we have the right pieces in play. And I hope that we can take a once-in-a-lifetime or once-in-a-generation prospect here and build him into what we think he can be. That's what I would say with our puppy side of things. I think we can take this journey and develop it. And I just think it's a cool analogy. So, I want to thank Lucky Duck. Lucky Duck, if you guys have not checked out the Lucky Duck kennel, do that. They also have a brand new large size that is out for those of you that have a bigger dog or want some more room. And they're both 5-star crash test rated. I believe it's the only large 5-star crash test rated kennel that's out there. So www.luckyduck.com to check them out. And you'll be glad you do so, because that's an awesome product. Well, thank you guys for spending the week with me. Thank you for letting me kind of live out a little childhood dream of mine of being somewhat of a sportscaster today. And it was kind of neat. NFL draft. Never thought it was as similar to dog ownership as I now think it is, but kind of cool. Anyways, have a great week, and we'll talk with you guys next week. Thanks for listening. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Leave us a review on iTunes. And a special thank you to Eukanuba, because without them, we couldn't do what we do here, bringing this information to you.